Hey everybody, welcome to another Savage Gentleman podcast. Really excited to have a very special guest today, none other than Jack Donovan joining us. And Jack and I, we go way back. Almost, two whole years, 3 whole years now, I think was the last time.
Closer to 3, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it's been really cool following him, seeing the things that he's been up to. His new book release just came out. We'll talk about that. Watching his journey into the realm of jiu-jitsu. He's been picking that up quite a bit. And, I've been learning a ton of stuff from him in our friendship. So it's been super cool. Jack, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
So the book just came out, Fire in the Dark. I guess we'll start there. It's as good a place as any.
Sure. It's important.
I think, unless, I'm being presumptuous. Maybe you have something else that you'd rather jump into. Am I getting ahead of myself? Is there another area you'd like to go, or is the book?
No. This is my job. I'm promoting a book now.
Well, and sometimes I feel bad because it's like when guys write a book or they have a thing that they're doing, right? It's like, man, you kind of beat that to death. And I don't know how many podcasts you've been on recently, but I imagine the book, and it's like, everyone asks what the philosopher thinks, but no one asks what the philosopher feels, right? And what do you really want to talk about?
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, it'll take a while. I mean, if we were asking about The Way of Men, yeah, I've done that podcast like 150 times or maybe 200 or just a lot. And but this one, I still got to get my shit together. I still got to get, my message refined. Because, the thing about it is you write a book and your head's so deep in it. It's like a forest for the trees kind of thing for a long time. And then you come out of it and you're like, how do I even talk about what this is about? Because I have all the details, And then it takes a while to get the elevator speech into it. Like what's really important? What do people care about? I'm still figuring that out. So this is all like an exercise really at this.
Okay. Well, perfect. Well, I am thrilled to be part of your process and one of the guinea pigs in this. So that's great. So Fire in the Dark just came out. I was one of the fortunate few who got to be on the advanced reader list, and I got my copy. Actually, I have it right here. How nice. And, man, this hit me pretty hard. You and I discussed that last time I was in town, but without being too corny, it really did kind of light a fire under me. And obviously I think that's your intention with it. And so what inspired this? What did you find was the need to write this? Because you've written about men and masculinity quite a bit, some may say quite exhaustively. So, what was the impetus for this book in particular?
Well, you're always trying to find the next thing and also how I fit into the puzzle. It could because we've talked about this before many times. There's all these other dudes talking about masculinity now, and they all have their different angle, and then you all kind of have to reconfigure your space as like, what am I good at? What do I have to offer that other people don't? And it's already, I can't write The Way of Men more than once. I already did that. So trying to find the next thing, and I was really enjoying the. I'm an artist from the background. That's what I have always done. And so I wanted to explore, really more about ideas and art and beauty and dreams and so forth. And I was obviously really into ritual. And a lot of people have seen pictures of me doing rituals out at my land, Vault Gang. And a lot of people were interested in what that was about. So I started writing a book about that. It was called Odin, Thor, Frey. And I was going to try and relate it to masculinity, as I relate everything to, because that's kind of my wheelhouse. Right. And so I started doing that, but then the book just got a lot bigger because it got a lot bigger, and also I didn't want to be confined to that, and I saw that there was such an opportunity for new creativity. If you really look at all mythologies and religions and look at the ideas of masculinity that can be integrated in all of them, and themes that repeat over and over again. And so that, you start out writing one book and then, you end up writing a different one, and that's probably good. It's really hard that way, but it's really good because, obviously a lot of thinking has to happen for that to happen. You have to work your way through a lot of ideas.
Gotcha. So the thing that really struck me that you spoke about in this book is the notion of ideals and creating ideals, and the fact that in society today we seem to be shunning the thought of an ideal and therefore we have a huge lack thereof. There are no ideals, and it's apparently, I think, to most people that's problematic, right? The fact that we don't have any collectively agreed upon aspirational goals, I guess, other than maybe TikTok followers, which
I know I gotta get my dance moves back.
Are you about that TikTok life? I can only imagine. I think you crush it, man. I think it's a huge missed opportunity for you.
I probably would crush it, and then I'd have to kill myself.
I don't know that I could. I may be able to look myself in the mirror, because of all the sweet internet money that would be coming in. I don't know that I can look my friends in the face, though. I think that would be the hardest thing.
What you do then is you just find new friends.
There you go. Now you're.
That's what people do. I mean, that's the Los Angeles solution to that problem.
There. And that's a viable solution, I think. So, when in this book, the key principles there are formulating these ideals, and you're using the tripart system that you created, but it's kind of in the book you illustrated that's kind of universal to almost all mythology from just about the entire globe and every period of time. And so I guess maybe talking a little bit about this idea of ideals, like when did you notice, like, man, there's no good ideals to follow anymore. There's no examples to really emulate in the world today.
Well, I mean, that's been a theme, I think, in my work. I've been writing about this stuff for, more than 10 years at this point. And, certain things change and certain things stay the same. And I wrote an essay many years ago now titled A Sky Without Eagles. Mm-hmm. And one of the themes was the lack of ideals, and that if I'm ruled by people, and if they are supposed to be superior in some way, I want to believe that they're superior, and I want to believe that they actually, are excellent. Mm-hmm. And you see that less and less in the world. Like you said, we could be ruled by TikTok millionaires. I mean, that's a perfect example. It's like, no, I mean, if I want to be ruled, I'd rather be ruled by like Navy SEALs and dudes who have been at the high end of things for a long time.
Sure.
And I'd rather see guys who are better at doing all the things that I wish I could do. Mm-hmm. Or that all the things that I want to be better at, they're really good at them. And we just don't see that. Where our society worships actors. And, which is nothing wrong with being an actor. I mean, if someone asked me to be in a movie, I'd do it tomorrow.
Sure. But, and there's a tremendous amount of skill. I mean, it is an art. It is a craft that takes, a long time to cultivate. I mean, there is something to it. However, I think we do conflate the characters with the actual, the actor themselves. And, hey, I'm sure Brad Pitt's super cool, but he is not Achilles. You know what I mean? Or
right.
Or whomever, he portrayed in the movie. He's not Tyler Durden as much as we'd like to believe that.
Exactly. They have they get to, I guess, just absorb all that glory that they are really, it's like they did one thing for 30 seconds and they're like, cut. And then they go sit in somewhere for 3 hours and then they come back. I mean, that's, if you ever, I know you've been on a movie set recently, and I've been on one a long time ago. And it's a lot of standing around, and then things happen for a second and then goes back to standing around.
Yeah.
And, it's not like, Achilles is running through a battle like tearing things up. That's not real. And, but there are guys who do some amazing things. And, to the credit of whatever the internet is, I was trying to talk to somebody about how I would use Reels the other day. And I'm like, well, my feed of Reels, because I follow cool things, is like all awesome snowboarders doing stuff that I can't do. So I guess that's not too bad. I'm not getting the dance videos because I don't watch those.
Right.
So there are still people doing amazing things, but I think that, like I said, we focus on actors and so forth so much, and obviously politicians and a lot of people who are maybe less than ideal in their everyday behavior, in the way they conduct themselves, in their overall achievements and accomplishments. And I think that, I'd rather look up to men who I really admire.
It's almost as though things have shifted to where it's almost the more negative attention someone can garner, the higher their social stock is, right? So it's less about what they're accomplishing and what feats they're actually doing, and more about, man, how much are they stirring up the hornet's nest? How much shit are they flinging on the wall? And then now these people are the ones who are getting the most attention and the biggest following and the highest reward. And so we're creating a real negative feedback loop, it seems, and have been for quite some time, where it's like, man, the guy who's out there crushing it and kicking ass and doing right by his family and society and all these noble efforts, you barely even hear about. But the person who is, making up, all these faults within the world and finding every cheek in everyone else's armor, and, those are the ones that seem to be elevating to the highest levels, seemingly, and maybe not. Maybe that's just perception, right? Because it's the loudest voice that kind of gets heard. But I don't think. And tell me if you think I'm wrong, because you delve into this. I don't think it's that far off the mark.
No, I think you nailed it with the loudest person. The squeakiest wheel gets the oil, and that's really what's happening. And you and I both, I think, have made a choice of how much of that we want to do, and how much we're comfortable with. And you have a sense that I could get a lot more attention really quick.
Sure.
But
undoubtedly.
At what expense? I've always thought, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to conduct yourself? I've always thought, you tell me I can't get a PR agent and get on some talk shows, because I'm pretty sure that I could have, especially when The Way of Men came out. And or I could go hard against feminists online and make a big name for myself and get a whole bunch of stuff written about myself and whatever. It's not that hard. All you have to do is just be like, hey, I want some attention, and start banging on some drums and poking at people. And, if you're reasonably interesting and you have anything going on, something's probably going to happen, because most people just want to hide. Right. And so, anyone who wants attention will get it, but it's not necessarily good attention.
Yeah, I struggle with that, because some might argue, and I guess it depends on how you measure success, right? Because if it's purely based off of financial gain, then it's like, well, you and I are idiots. We are complete idiots for not.
We both are screwing up so bad.
Right.
Right.
Like we totally have, if that's your metric, right? But, for me, I look at it, it's like, man, there's going to come a time where my children are going to be old enough where they can go back and they can read the articles that I've written, the interviews that I've given, the podcasts, the videos that I've made, and they're going to be like, "What, dude? What's going on here?" So yeah, clearly you and I we're missing the boat here, terribly by not taking advantage of this thing. But like you were saying, we both have this idea of a legacy, and maybe some people would attribute that to being foolish. I don't know. It seems like a lot of folks, the way they're living their life, that doesn't seem to be a huge factor. I don't know, or maybe they don't. Maybe their idea of a legacy differs from what maybe perhaps you and I are considering.
The funny thing about legacy is, everyone says that you should work to impress other people, and then your legacy is trying to impress other people you haven't met yet and who haven't even been born. So it is kind of funny about that. But I started looking at my body of work a few years ago, and I wanted to write things that were still going to be relevant in 10 years, and that's why I stopped writing about the news mostly. Because most things that happen in the news, they're just not relevant. No one cares in months or weeks,
or days at the rate we're going now. I mean, it's a flash in the pan.
Yeah. So I wanted to write things that were, a little bit more universal and a little bit more timeless. And I feel like I've done that, and that's when I look at, you think about protecting your legacy too. Now it's like The Way of Men is still good, and it's almost 10 years old, and it's still good, and it's still right, and it's still selling, and it's still, I think, influencing people. And there are some books like that. I mean, like Iron John is still around, and people are still reading it, and it's still at the top of the same Amazon list that I am. And Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus is still around, and so I think it's better to focus on that long game. And it just makes me actually think about, we've kicked around, I know we've both talked about George Washington, and we talk about this superficial world that we're living in, where people are just reacting to things really fast, and talking about the moment of the day, and sniping at each other, and just trying to stir things up and make trouble on Twitter or whatever, and get a lot of attention really fast, and then move their goalposts and pretend like they never said that 5 minutes later, and we see that all the time. And then you read Washington's biography, and I don't know if he could have done it. I don't know if he could have existed in this world, because his standards were higher, and he really thought about stuff before he really put it out there.
Yeah, by the time he fired off a tweet, people would have no idea what he's talking about. The context would have been completely lost, because it had been 3 days later, and now we're on to the fifth thing down the list. Going back to this notion of ideals, I like, you mentioned George Washington as this kind of man, just the archetypical ideal man. I think it's hard to argue against that. Some people may look at some of his past deeds, and they may scrutinize some actions, but I don't think, that's a really fair argument to make. And, if we're going to use the context of a savage gentleman, man, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a better example.
Yeah, man. I mean, dude was real careful about how many buttons went on his jacket, and he sent things off to tailors and told them, left lists of really long instructions about how he wanted it done. He picked out his own silverware. He wanted everything to be just so in his aesthetic life, in his when he entertained. He was apparently a very good dancer. That was kind of he loved to dance with the ladies. That was his thing for years. And so he had that whole side of him too. He's very much a savage gentleman, but he also retardedly ran into battle, and people had to pull him out because he would be shot. There'd be shooting, people be shooting all around him, and he'd be like, I'm George Washington. It's not a problem.
Right.
And and so it really cool dude. So and that's the ideals in the book that I talk about. The idea of this warrior figure, the striker, and this idea of a father, and the idea of Lord of the Earth, and he was all three of those. He was a warrior, who then a warrior first, who then ascended to be really the father of a nation. He didn't have any kids of his own, and that was his baby. And he was also a farmer, and
he was very much an everyman.
He bred a specific kind of mule. Like he was super into that. And when he was at war, a lot of times he was writing letters about his crops and whatever about his farm and how things were doing. And maybe you should change this and change these hedges and whatever. So, I mean, he was really an all-around guy. And actually, for my party, I guess I'll probably sell these at some point. But I just because, you'd have things made so easily these days. Sure. And so I made myself little, like, what would Washington do? Like, like they have the little, like, what would Jesus do or whatever, like, wristband things. I have, like, what would Washington do, and I think, you could do a lot worse than asking yourself that question in most scenarios.
No kidding. No, I mean, I think there are far worse people to emulate than George Washington. I think that's a great bit of advice. I'm going to start implementing that and thinking, and before I do something, thinking like, okay, hey man, how would old George Washington take a look at this? What would be his perspective? And I think what I really like about him as the exemplar is he does embody all three components that you wrote about in the book. And that's what really appealed to me in reading it, is as I'm picking up each piece of it, I'm able to see aspects of myself in all three parts. And that's what was really cool, is how approachable it was. There are parts that are obviously very esoteric, right? But I think you did a great job of blending that and really going super deep with, okay, here's how this can be accessible as a regular guy going about my life, how I can tap into these very lofty and idealized, ambitious personas. And I think, man, that's really exciting to give guys the license and then kind of that pathway to do. So when I say, I found it very inspirational, that was a huge part of it for me.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the purpose of having ideals, right? I mean, so like, what's the best possible version of this thing that I'm trying to do? Mm-hmm. And that's basically the idea of the book, is that I've broken into three different areas of life and three different roles that men have to do, and it has to do with the metaphor of the fire, which I talk about in the book, but this idea of creation and making rules and so forth, and then protecting the things that you have, and then perpetuating life. We all do those things all the time, and so that's what ideals are for. Like, what is the best possible way that I think that this could be done, and then do it more like that. Yeah. And without those ideals, and we live in this society, and this is what we were kind of getting at, is that we live in this society where people are saying, no, you shouldn't have ideals because that makes people feel bad. Like, you shouldn't say that someone should be stronger, and that's good to be strong because then weak people feel sad. And you shouldn't say that you should be stoic and have a lot of emotional control because then that makes people sad when they cry and they don't know how to handle themselves. And we all have struggles, and we're all not great at everything, and none of us are perfect, up into and including Washington. Like, no one's perfect, but what's the best version that you can imagine? And when you take away the best version that you could imagine of a thing and say that shouldn't matter, there's no North Star. There's no direction you need to be going into. You can just kind of move with the water, whatever way it goes. Like, whatever's happening right now, I can be whatever people need me to be, or want me to be, or please people, or whatever. But you don't really have any integrity, and you don't really have anything pushing you. Yeah. Like, if everyone says that everything that you do is perfect just the way it is, then why would you be better?
Be right. There's no reason to change, and that's when you talk about the fire in the dark, like that original fire being a reference point, when you make everything, when you remove that, right, you no longer have that beacon, then you don't have a reference point, and so there's really nowhere to go, right? There's no ability to improve. There's no ability to advance. You just kind of stay where you're at, especially if there's no fire to guide you. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not just going to walk around aimlessly through the dark. And that's where I feel like we've kind of gotten to some degree in society, with a lot of people, not having any direction because there's nothing to aspire to. There's no ideal to emulate. So they do nothing and they stay right where they are. And, there is a massive amount, I don't know the numbers, but seemingly based off of the mental health issues that the skyrocketing and the uptick of that in the past, I don't know what decade, 5 years, last year even. I mean, it's just been steadily increasing. I think it's partly attributed to not having that direction, not having any form of guidance, because that fire has just been, snuffed out.
Yeah, man. Like while you're saying that, I thought about this email that I got the other day, and it was the worst. I got an email from somebody that said it was like a woman in Scotland. Somehow I just decided she needed to email me.
Nice.
And as I read through her email, she was like, I think that people should be nice, and you shouldn't be, and you should not, people shouldn't be mean to nice people. And it was clear from reading her little manifesto that she sent me, which I guess was directed at me, but was really very vague. It seemed that her highest value was niceness. And that's, I think, where a lot of people are. And well, that's nice. That didn't make anyone uncomfortable, and that's okay. And no one was offended, no one was uncomfortable. That person was merely pleasant. And that's they idealize pleasantness over all things, and that means everybody going with the same flow, and no one excelling above anyone else, and no one making anyone saying anything or doing anything that would make anyone else uncomfortable.
Which in this day and age, yeah, and I was gonna say, and in this day and age means you don't do anything, because you literally can't. I mean, you can't put a video up on YouTube without someone having, putting a thumbs down or having some snarky remark. I mean, go online, look at a video of just puppies playing, and there'll be like 50 thumbs down and half a dozen people complaining about it in some way, shape, or form. So again, it is not. One, it's unrealistic, but even if it was actually achievable, it means we would do nothing, right? It's akin to the idea of the fear of failure that paralyzes people. People don't want to try anything because they may fail, they may not be perfect, they may not be excellent at it. And this creates a weird dichotomy where of like achieving for the ideal, right? And they're like, well, if I can never reach that ideal, then what's the point? So you have that mentality, right? But then if you don't have the ideal, then you have nothing to aspire to. So either way, you end up doing nothing. So I think you have to have like this paradox of, this is perfection, this is what I'm trying to obtain, knowing full well that I'll probably never get there, and still being okay with that. And that's where I think people, like, they have a hard time operating in paradoxes. And we've, from a philosophical standpoint, I think it's become too complex for our brains. It's too much to compute. So we've gotten away from them. But you look in ancient times, most everything anyone talked about or did it was some form of a paradox.
Yeah, ancient writings are all like about well, maybe it's this way, maybe it's that way. We're not really sure. All the ancient philosophers are still trying. We're just trying to figure stuff out. We really haven't made it together in a lot of ways, and which is fine. And also, you need something to aspire to, and if you don't, like you said, you do nothing, and or really, I think the ideal has become nod, just smile and nod. Is that's the best way that you can get through life, is smile and nod. And that's really what a lot of people want us to do right now, is just like, this is the message, everyone smile and nod and do the thing. And that's kind of where we're at in a lot of people. And if you don't smile and nod, people get really angry.
Yes, they do. You are a heretic. You are, apparently you don't care about anything or anyone other than yourself, and you are now like a menace to society. And we're seeing that anyone who happens to buck the system by even asking a question or pausing to like, hey, wait a minute, this seems interesting. How dare you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's no questioning that's happening anymore. It's all like, and I think the stuff that we've talked about with the online communication and so forth has made that the case, is that there's a wave of what is happening. And if you're either on the wave or you're not on the wave. Mm-hmm. And if you're on the wave, then you're fine. And so like, if someone posts a thing on Twitter, then if you're one of the people who are liking it and reposting it and whatever, you're on the wave. And if you're not on the wave, then you're going to get,
crushed. Well, sure. But the problem with that is the wave is so fickle, right? That even arguably the best surfers on the planet, struggle to stay on top of it. And you see that happen where it's like, man, this person I thought was just like dead center, right, right in the middle of that wave and just had it perfectly balanced and worked out. And out of nowhere, the wave shifts. That person comes crashing down and gets just destroyed by that wave, which, it baffles me that people don't see the dangers of that, where they're carrying their pitchforks and joining in, in the mob, not recognizing that mob can shift at any point, and now you're in the crosshairs. And that's the dangers of it, but few people seem to recognize, how detrimental that can potentially be.
Yeah, man, it happens all the time, and the lesson isn't being learned.
No,
you're seeing people who have said the right things that everyone was saying at all the right times, and then they become expendable for whatever reason. I mean, like whatever I say right now, the example will be old by the time you air this. But
sure.
One example might be like Governor Cuomo in New York. He's going to get crushed. He was the darling who did all the right things, and now he's going to be thrown under the bus. And that can happen to any of these people who are doing that. And I guess they're just relying on a numbers game, like that it won't be.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they can't do it to everyone, because then the whole movement or whatever the ideology, whatever you want to call it, will then be destroyed. But it's like, man, I don't want to play that game. Like, I don't want to be, on a team that is built off of sacrificial lambs, where it's just like, all right, well, who's going to get it today? Because we got to put somebody on the chopping block, like, and if you are, like you said, become expendable, then guess what? That is now you. And that's it just doesn't seem like a very wise, team to be on, or wise, trajectory to follow. But, that's, I guess, for smarter people than you and I to figure out and decide. I'm just going to kind of sit over here and just try to run my business as best I can, and, keep my family happy, and, continue to do rad stuff. And, hopefully no one gets in my way. And if they do, then I guess I'll have to resort to other measures, I suppose. I don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, move with the game a little bit. We all try to do that. But, I mean, all this really is the result of a collapse of a consensus of morality, or a consensus of what ideals are. And when I wrote this book, I talked a lot about Nietzsche. Nietzsche is famous for saying that God is dead, but what he was really saying at the time was that because of that fact that people were becoming less religious, or because there was a split between the Catholic and the Protestant church or whatever, that the universal consensus was falling apart. Mm-hmm. And so not everyone had the same idea of what was good, and not everybody had the same idea of what should be done. and what is best and what is worst and what is a sin and what is going to get you to heaven or whatever. And that was the really interesting thing that he said was that's what was the point of saying that. And that's where we are right now. We're at the farthest end of what he could possibly have imagined. Whereas no one can agree on what is good or evil on any given time. And whatever it is this week can change next week or whatever. And they'll just shift the goalposts and like, well, this is what we're saying now.
Yeah, and it completely flip-flop in one. That's the crazy part, is what was good can be bad, and that same thing that was good then bad can then flip and be good again over the course of, again, this will probably be dated, but, there's a bunch of people now jumping up and down about the kids in cages situation. Where at one point it was totally fine. We had to process these children who came in. And of course, what else are you going to do? And then all of a sudden there was a shift, and now this is the worst thing ever. How can we put these kids in cages? Right? And everyone's losing their mind. And then it shifts again. And now it's back to, we got to process them, and we're doing the best we can because there's kids coming over. And it's like, literally nothing has changed, in terms of policy. It's just, who the person in the front of the room has changed, and now the perception has, completely shifted. And that's just one example that we're using here. But you're right. Without consensus in a society, it really becomes almost impossible to communicate effectively and actually get along and make any kind of progress. So the amount of infighting that happens kind of just pisses in the face of any kind of actual meaningful advancement. And that's where we're at right now, it seems.
Yeah. Well, and it's even gone one step further to, it's not even what is right and wrong and good and bad. It's what is true and what is false is now like completely up for grabs. No one can actually agree on what is true. And because facts are up for grabs to a certain extent, facts are no longer important. It's like who says them and at what time, and who approved that, and it's no one's really sure about what facts are anymore. So we can't even begin to make moral judgments about what things that happen because we can't even agree on what happened. Yeah, and that's what's really bizarre. And none of us can really trust any sources. And that's what's really, really, really strange about the modern world. And that's why you said you do have to have some kinds of consensus. And one of the reasons I brought this up, and I dealt with it earlier, was people always say that there are no initiations for men. And my answer to that was always like, well, what are you going to initiate them into? There's no collective ideal of what masculinity is. Right. So what their role should be. And so you can't, what are you going to initiate them into? What are you going to make men say that they have to become, because there's no consensus on that? Yeah. And that's been a really big problem with men for a long time, is that there's no consensus on what it means to be good at being a man or being a good man, or, so many of these, like, how are you supposed to behave? And that's been a moving goalpost too. And there are so many different factions of what that could mean. These guys are going to tell you that thing. These guys are going to tell you that thing. The news will tell you this. Your feminist professor at college is going to tell you this. You're going to have all these different inputs. And so there's no real way to aspire to be the right thing. Sure. And so we need to, I think, it's up to, I would say it's up to us. We're the guys who are alive right now. Right. And, it is up to us to a certain degree to say what we're going to hold up as a value and what we're going to say is good and what is going to be better and what is not good. And, we have to encourage that in younger men by holding up some kind of ideals. Sure. And saying, hey, and not being afraid to say, hey, this guy is really great. This guy's killing it. Let's be born.
Yeah. Here's a good example. Yeah. And again, going back to the book, what I really appreciate about it is I almost had to read it. Someone, you probably could have told me to my face, or someone else could have delivered the message, but it was almost like I had to read it in a book to give myself the license to actually be that guy. To say like, hey, you know what? I can be that guy. Right. And truthfully, I know people can look at what we do, right? Because we're on social media. You're a published author. I'm a professional fighter. We have our outlets and we do things or whatever. And sometimes people can get a weird perception through like seeing things on social media, like, oh man, these guys are, whatever, fill in the blank, whatever they concoct in their head of who and what we are. But it's like, hey, I will be the first one to tell you that I am a super fucking regular dude. You know what I mean? Like, of all the trappings of any guy who has ever experienced life on the earth, you know what I mean? Like, I am that guy, and I run into the same kind of bullshit problems that every other dude runs into. I just happen to have a super nice beard while doing it. That's maybe the only, different and pretty badass cauliflower ear, right? So I look different than what some of the other guys do, but I still experience the same things. And so for me, if I can pick up this mantle, I think the book gives the license to every man to pick up that same mantle and carry that torch of setting the example, because no matter where you are in life, there's somebody looking up to you. So be that fire in the dark for them. That was my big takeaway. And I was like, all right, cool, man. I super needed to hear that. And so, like I said, it's really rekindled something in me.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, I was going to make a joke that I was like, well, I can't relate to you at all because I sit upon this golden throne. and nothing matters. The sun, these are not lights. The sun shines on me like...
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's the perception that I think people get when someone gets in front of a camera on a regular basis, right? It's like, man, you have really high-end professional photography, right? So visually, when you look, at it, it's like, man, that guy's life it's so well lit, and he lives his life in, high definition all the time, and his colors are so vibrant. But it's like, yeah, you average guy, whatever, regular guy, I don't like to use that term, but whatever, anyone could look at, have that same lighting structure if they had the photography and whatever, not to say that everyone can be Jack Donovan, but, the perception, the image, sometimes, people don't realize that, like, that's a cultivated thing. And it's for a purpose. It is to serve as that ideal. It's to garner the attention, right? So that people can look at this thing and admire it and say, oh, cool. Man, I want to be like Jack Donovan. That guy's got freaking sweet badass eagles in his office. It looks amazing.
Well, and the thing is, there's a big emphasis put on being real.
Yeah.
And like, be real. Well, I can go to Walmart and be real. That's what real is. I go to Costco and it's real. But what is the ideal? Why should we not try to put our best face forward? And here's when people see me, I want them to see me as the best version I could imagine of myself being.
Yep.
And that's the way people used to behave actually a lot. You go to church, you wear your Sunday best. That's the way I want God to see me.
Right.
Like not in the toilet. I want them to see me like dressed nice. Yeah. And and everyone used to aspire to that, like be the best version of yourself. And so why not? Why not try and put forward an ideal and to put my best self forward and to because I think it inspires people. Like when I had people over to my office and they see this and whatever, I mean, that's to inspire you to create something similar. If you create something like, how would you do it? And to say you could be better too, you could, cultivate something around yourself that, match your own ideals or your own vision of who you want to be and help create yourself. Because, I could show up and be like in just whatever and be dirty. And I didn't have to shave my head this morning so that I wouldn't look like a middle-aged accountant. And it's it's like, but why not be the best version of yourself? And I think that's what an ideal is. And like if you don't have ideals, then there is no ideal version of yourself, because you're just dude X walking through the world responding to stimuli. But if you do believe that, like, hey, I should be in better shape all the time, well, that takes a lot of work, and you have to put the work in to make that happen. But there is a payoff to that. And
absolutely,
there's the same thing with so many other things. I mean, of course, I'm normal and fallible. We joked before we went on the show that I got choked out and put to sleep the other night, and and that happens. And that's part of trying to be better at anything.
Which, by the way, I will say, because I have grappled with you, and between your freaking neck shoulder girth, like that is no small feat to actually choke you out. Like that took some serious effort and energy, and that's coming from a guy who's fought professionally and has done quite a bit of grappling. So I'm going to have to talk to Michael, and I'm surprised he didn't text me and tell me that, honestly.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it was just like, like you get in a weird position, you're in a weird position. I'm not used to being able to squeeze my way out of triangles. I'm pretty good at it. But it came from a weird position that we rolled into it. And so I was down lower than I normally am. And the last thing, I didn't have any hands free. And so I was like, okay, you got me. And then, but he didn't hear it. And so then I woke up staring at the ceiling, a few minutes later.
Yeah.
And that's just how it works. And it's like my third time.
Yeah.
And, it's just part of the game. And, it happens, and it's not a big deal. But people are so afraid. I have to think my dad texted me today, because they don't really understand that. And I mentioned it in a text the other day. And they think it's like getting knocked out, which is a little bit more severe.
Sure.
Because I've had that happen too. Yeah. And, and so they're like, you be careful. That can't be good. And I'm like, it's fine. I was rolling again like 5 minutes later.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair for the young guys listening, because sometimes people can take stuff and manipulate a little bit. We're not saying that you need to go and just get choked out all the time. Like, that's not a great thing for you. But if you're never pushing that limit, you don't know where that threshold is, right? And I think that is important. And, if you can do it in a relatively safe environment with partners that, aren't going to just keep cranking on something, even though your limp, lifeless body is not responding, man, I think everybody who grapples should at least, at some point experience that and understand, like, okay, I came through the other side. Cool. Now I know what that feels like. I think those reference points are really important, And we were talking, oh man, there was something I wanted to circle back on, because you brought up such a great point, talking about, putting our best face forward, right? And actually giving a shit and caring, and striving towards an ideal. And it's funny that so many people kind of poo-poo that nowadays. In which case, if that's how you really feel, then why have art? Why have anything? Because art was intended to be a manifestation of an ideal, right? If you don't appreciate any kind of ideals, then you don't care about art. And so the way I look at it, and what you were alluding to, I believe, is like, man, why can't we ourselves be from time to time that piece of art? Like, why can't we look at our own selves as an artistic expression? People might say, well, that's really it's very self-serving or self-centered, right? And you're so narcissistic to care what other people look like, and what you look like to other people. But I look at it as like, man, if you have the ability to inspire others, man, you're doing a disservice to them by not putting that best foot forward, right? And I think, I think every man is capable of it, even if it's only to your immediate family. Maybe you're not doing it on a grand scale. Maybe you're not, selling out stadiums and talking in front of millions of people, right? Maybe you're not Tony Robbins inspirational level, but who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. There are people who are watching you that can draw something from you in much the same way that you, I would like to think, have taken something from someone else. So in my mind, the I don't know, the karma of things should be that you give that back, right? So put forth the effort, whatever that is in your attire, in the way you carry yourself, in your physical, your body itself. I mean, these are all things that we can create. And now we kind of live that mythology ourselves, right? I think that's kind of the cool thing, that what you're talking about is like, man, why not? Like, look, you can choose to live your life any way you want to. It can be as mundane as you want it to be, or it can be as epic and extravagant as you want it to be. Man, I don't know. I want to be on the epic side. Like, I want to live my life as epically as I can, even if it's in my own mind, even if no one else sees it or feels it but me. Like, that's the world I want to create for myself.
Yeah, and the thing is that they do see that. If you're really doing that, then that does come across. And it doesn't have to be, everyone doesn't have to be in a podcast or do whatever or have this big, public profile. But I can think of tons of guys that I am a composite of. Mm-hmm. And they aren't guys that that you'll take little pieces of the best behavior that you see in others and incorporate them into yourself. I could think of a guy who comes over the role recently that I've been impressed with. I was like, wow, he's really got his shit together in a bunch of ways that are good. And that happens all the time. I always say that I learned a lot about I guess the physicality or whatever of masculinity from a good friend of mine who no one knows. He doesn't even have social media. So, but the certain way that he conducts himself, it inspired me at a certain time. Mm-hmm. And I carry that with me. And an old advisor, I would say, of mine at some point used to say, your friends are in certain ways, the people you surround yourself with, they are, you can channel them. And I definitely do that. I don't know if you do. Yeah. I do it all the time. Like you kind of imagine yourself as so-and-so, and how would he do that? Yeah. Like how would he handle that situation? Or you can imagine yourself even being, it can be fake people or real people, and I do both. The other day I was doing audiobook reading, and in my mind I was William Shatner for like a half an hour. But like how would he say this right now? Yeah. What would he do? And but we can do that with real and fake people. And then we can make them our deals, and they become a little pantheon for us of people we draw from when we aren't sure how we should conduct ourselves or behave or whatever. Like, be like that guy who was a little bit better than you.
Yeah, because look, if we're all really honest with ourselves, no one knows what the shit they're doing, right? Like, we're literally all making it up as we go, and some people might be a little bit farther along in some area or another. And so I think there's this stigma where I don't know if it's not giving credit where credit is due, but there's this idea of the self-made man, right? Like I am my own unique individual, and I have carved my own self, my own effigy out of the, marble, whatever, and I made myself this way, all in my own power, under my own inspiration. It's like bullshit, But that's like the cool thing that I think a lot of people want to portray, is that they're their own demagogue that they have created themselves without any other external influence. And it's like, that's not how that works, man. We are we're primitive creatures. We emulate. We see the other monkeys in the tribe using tools, so we're like, oh dude, that's pretty cool, let me pick up this stick and sharpen it and see what I can do with it, and that's just how we as a species have learned. And so for us now in modern times as modern men to, kind of completely disregard that evolutionary trait, it seems foolish, right? I think there's nothing wrong with talking about and wholeheartedly admitting that, yeah, man, there's other dudes that are inspiring me that I'm, borrowing things from to become who and what I want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that men are a little bit shy or ashamed to do that sometimes.
Yeah, it was just like, gay, like, oh man, why don't you, why are you going to stroke that guy off or whatever, right? There's,
yeah, but it's funny actually. Ryan Mickler actually made a post the other day, congratulating Sean Whalen on opening up a store because he said that the winners celebrate winners.
Yep.
And that is true because you don't see that coming from people who are doing well. Like you don't see that like, well, no one's better than me. Like I can't. Everyone sucks except for me. You don't see that fear of acknowledging people as much from people who are really confident.
Right.
And I think that if you feel like you're doing well in life, it is a little easier. I should do it more than I do because I preach it, and and then I'm like, oh, I guess I should say, hey, good job once in a while to somebody, But I have to remind myself to do it because I mean it. I just don't think about it.
Sure.
But I do think that's important, is that we have to acknowledge men who we do think are better. And that's really what having ideals is all about.
Absolutely.
That guy's doing it better. The thing I've talked about, a lot in the book is that, we used to have statues of great men. Yep. And now we're at a point in society that we're tearing all of those statues. Well, not we, but they. People are tearing all of those statues down. And they're not replacing them with anything. They're replacing them with like nothingness, or at best victimhood, or maybe like a victim, like martyr kind of person. But like in many cases, it's just I wrote a piece years ago about what I call like kind of just crappy like almost preschool art. Like something very
just crayon scribbles.
Yeah, a lot of corporate art is like that. It's very like, here's some stuff that isn't going to offend anybody or inspire anybody or upset anybody. We'll just put it in the lobby. And that's, because we can't that's not going to be a problem. So that's what we have instead of people who are maybe controversial in their own time, who, but are up on a pedestal somewhere. I'm almost scared to mention it because if it's still up, I can't believe it. But in Portland, in the center of town, near the art museum, there was a fantastic statue of a horse-mounted Theodore Roosevelt, which you can't even imagine in Portland right now. Who knows if it's still there? Right. It seems unlikely. But it had the greatest inscription under it. It was just, this thing that someone had wrote about him, like, everywhere he goes, he carries his own pack. And it was just this really, really excellent. This is a description of a great man. Yeah. On a pedestal on which he is mounted in bronze. And we need that, because that's inspiring to go stand in front of that and read that description of him and like, oh, I should be more like that.
Yeah, 100%. And again, that's something that I think it's easy, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit, where, we're looking at each other and then we're looking around like, all right, well, where's the guy? Who's going to be the guy? And we're waiting for that guy to show up, and then we kind of realize they're like, oh shit, damn it, we have to be that guy. And I think every guy, should take that, upon themselves, of like, instead of looking around and waiting for, someone to sort shit out, it's like, man, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? Right? And I think that that's an attitude that we all should adopt and do whatever we can, whatever we're capable of. I mean, for you and me, this is our full-time job, right? So we're obviously going to have a lot more time and energy to dedicate towards this endeavor. But that doesn't mean that someone else that's working, full time and whatever, they can't do anything. And I think if we, find that ideal and start trying to become that ideal in and of ourselves, then we'll be inspiring others to do the same thing. And it hopefully will, spread, it'll catch fire and continue to spread and hopefully outweigh or change the tide of some of the other really bad ideologies that just seem to be taking precedence these days.
The thing about the idealism like that and becoming that guy and spreading that word is that we have to be uncompromising about it. And that's where we have to stand our ground. Because it's so easy when someone says, oh, well, that guy isn't the be all and end all. And how could you say that's how you should be? You have to be when someone can't be like that. Or there starts to be this chain of excuses around saying that something's good. Mm-hmm. And we have to not be afraid to say something is good and to be proud of that and to stand by it. Because if we can't put it out there what we think is good, then we have no fire in the dark ourselves. We have no axis mundi. We have no North Star or direction. And we need that ourselves. So we can't just let people back us down and talk us out of hey, this is really good. Period.
Yeah. And I don't care what you think, right? Like there's nothing you can say or do to convince me that, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not good. I don't give a shit. Be like, oh, well, it was appropriated from Japanese culture. And so really I don't give a shit. Like, call it what you want to call it, but the art of folding clothes with people in them is a really good and valuable skill set and thing for people to practice. And that's a very trivial or superficial thing, right? I mean, when we're talking about morality, there's obviously much bigger, deeper things, but the point remains is like, man, like you said, we have to have that assertion of what is good and what is right, and we need to be able to stick by that. Otherwise, man, what's the point? We just blow in the wind like everyone else and end up going nowhere. Yeah.
And people talk you out of things by bringing up exceptions to rules.
Yes.
And that is one of the worst habits in the modern world. I really think it's like that we can't acknowledge a general rule or a general stereotype or a general this is normally how this goes.
Oh boy, don't you say that S word. Stereotypes. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, there are generalities about people that exist for a reason, whether it's men or women or whatever. And we can't be afraid to say this is normally how this works. That doesn't mean that it's always like that.
Right.
There are always exceptions to rules, and there always have been. But if we can't make a general statement about something, trees have green leaves. Because most trees actually have green leaves. Now, they don't all have green leaves, and they don't always have green leaves, not all year long, not all the time. But trees have green leaves.
Right. If I'm trying to convey the image of a tree, like I'm going to draw a brown trunk and I'm going to have branches that come out and I'm going to have little, green squigglies to signify the leaves, and even my 3-year-old son can recognize what that is. And so, for just for the sake of like ease of communication, you need to have these little shortcuts, right? But people have taken, because this is the fun thing to do, if you make some kind of generality about something, even in passing, now the new hotness is to find how many holes you can poke in it and see how many gotchas you can, slap onto that person for saying such a horrendous and terribly egregious, offensive thing.
Yeah, and really, it's talking to you like you're an idiot in the way that, like, oh, I do realize that leaves fall off of trees, and they aren't always on trees. Sometimes, if they're deciduous, and I realize that there are other things going on, But what you just talked about, this drawing, I mean, that's a platonic form of a tree.
Yes.
You know, like that is the basic idea of a tree. And there are all kinds of variations within that and whatever. And we can say that about trees. We can say that about.
Oh, so what? You hate bushes now? Is that what you're telling me? Oh, you're talking about trees. You hate all other plants. Okay, yeah, you're racist.
A tree if it wants to be. Yeah, you know, and what if that bush feels like a tree? Yeah, like you don't know. How would you know? Do you talk to trees? Do you talk to bushes? Did you ask them? You know, like there's all these games that you can play with, and it's really, I think the point of that is to create disorientation and confusion. Because if nothing can really be true, then we can't really make decisions or, make general rule. I mean, laws are based on like, hey, if you give all these people this opportunity to do this bad thing, a good percentage of them are probably going to do it. So this is why we can't allow this. You know, like this is like we have police because, thousands and thousands of years of history have shown that if you don't, then like people might murder each other a little bit. Like that's
probably
not always, not all people will do that, but it's going to happen more often. You know, and if you leave your door unlocked, someone might walk in. I mean, actually, that has happened to me right before this podcast. I left my door unlocked to my office, and I heard something out here, and then I heard a knock, and there's a dude standing in my lobby. It's like a private office. I'm like, whoa. Whoa. And he just was asking if this was the vape shop that was down the street. And I'm like, no, it's not the vape shop. But I left my door unlocked. If you leave your door open, someone might walk in.
They're going to stumble in.
Yeah, and that's so many things. And that's why we have these, rules and laws and ideals and whatever, because there are patterns in human behavior.
Certainly. And these thoughts aren't mutually exclusive in that, okay, we can have generalities, right, for the purpose of just like getting through the day and having conversations, right? And then we can also have extenuating circumstances where, okay, man, yeah, sure, maybe we need to talk to that bush and see what's going on with it. And maybe because of that particular bush, we might have to reevaluate how we categorize trees. But that is like such a minuscule occurrence that in the grand scope of things, unless we are talking to that tree at that moment, at that time about its, whatever feelings about, or I'm sorry, bush. I don't know. I just misgendered the tree. Shit. Bush, tree bush.
It turns out it was burning. It was a burning bush, and it was God. You really fucked up.
Shit. Oh, I'm way off. Oh man, so many mistakes were made. And those things aren't mutually exclusive. That's not to say that because I made this generality, I don't care about any tree bush hybrid that has ever existed, right? It's just I'm trying to make a different point, and you're getting hung up on this other thing that's not even that super relevant to the conversation. You just found like something where you can jab and poke, and that's what you're fixating on and taking advantage of that versus just trying to move ahead with your day and like, I don't know, get something actually accomplished. That's the thing that makes me crazy with some of these crusades that people are going on. It's like, well, you did it, I guess. Like, congratulations, Hasbro, you have saved the world because we no longer have Mr. Potato Head, right? You fixed it. All the problems now are solved. You did your part. Bravo. And it's like, look, Hasbro can do whatever the shit they want. Like, I don't care. It's their company, and if they feel compelled to do that, that's fine. I think the issue is actually just making a big deal out of it on one way or the other. You know what I mean? Like I don't care what Hasbro does. I'm still going to call that little figure a Mr. Potato Head because that's what it is to me. And if someone wants to fight me over it, well, I guess good luck. Like, come at me, bro. If we really want to come to blows over this fucking, child's toy, I guess we can have at it. But again, that seems like a really misuse of time and energy in my mind.
Fight you, they'll just find a way to destroy your income.
Okay.
That's actually how that works. But
Oh shit! Don't do that.
Because that would.
Well, then we will be fighting for sure.
But I think I can bring that back to stuff that I think questions that both of us I think get a lot. This relates to, let's say we say it's good to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
You and I guarantee both get the same question, which is like, well, what about that guy who's handicapped? And like, I'm sure we both get that. Like, what about this guy? Are you saying that he can't be masculine because he's handicapped? And no, that's not, because we are grown men who can make exceptions to rules and understand that not everything is not always the same. Like, okay, well, that guy's never probably going to like squat 405 because he's in a wheelchair. So but the basic principles, well, what else can you do?
Yeah.
We'll see that guy. We'll take the guy and say, hey, you still have value. You can steer you in a different direction. You can contribute in some other way. How else can you be strong? How else can you do, like, you don't have to just let the whole house of cards fall down of all values because this guy is an exception to a rule.
Right. Be like, oh, that's a bad rule. That's a bad rule because there's an exception.
The mentality that people have is that's a bad rule because that guy is an exception. And, like I said, growing up in a household where my dad was handicapped, like that doesn't hold water. Like that's never held water in my life at all.
Sure.
Yeah, because my dad would be like, my dad would never tell you that it's not better to be strong. In fact, and this is so messed up, but it's funny. I think I might have told you already in person, but like at his funeral, he because he's always been handicapped because he had polio when he was a kid. Right. At his funeral, he wants me to say, well, at least my dad can finally run. Because he thinks it'll be hilarious. Because he has like just a humor, and he's like, that's it. Not everyone gets the same shake in life. Not everybody's the same height. Not everybody's the same strength. We all have like genetic advantages and disadvantages. I'm never going to be whatever that strongman in Iceland, whatever. Like,
the mountain.
Yeah, they're never going to be the mountain.
Yeah,
like I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that. That's fine. Yeah. Well, and the exhibition of strength, right, can vary. You know what? Like your dad, as an example, or someone else who may have some other physical disabilities. The fact that person has been able to, live a fulfilling life and make it to the point that they have, that is strength in of itself. I mean, that is a display of strength, and that's something that think people can emulate, where they look at this person like, we posted a video to the league, and it was a guy, I think he was missing both arms, and I don't know the backstory. I don't know if he was, if it was from birth or he was an amputee or whatever. The dude is out in the cold chopping wood with an axe by himself, picking it up, with however much of his arm was still there and his chin, lifting it up and chopping it. I mean, holy shit! That if that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what does. You're like, I mean, I can't say that dude's not strong. That guy has more strength and willpower than I'll probably ever possess in my life.
Yeah, I can't even imagine doing that. It's hard enough to chop wood on a good day.
With both hands,
I'm very strong. And that is very.
It's not easy. It's not an easy thing.
It's a good bit of work. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that. I think this idea of just, well, I found one counterpoint. So the entire theory is flawed. Is in fact a very flawed, illogical way of looking at things, and it kind of goes against the whole mantra of like everything is permissible and touchy and feely and it's all right because whatever. It's like, well, wait a minute. If it's all okay, if anything can be anything, then why can't my statement be true, even though there's this maybe 1 in a million, 1 in a billion outlier? Because your standard, which is a non-standard, is full of contradictions. Yeah. And yet that can stand. Right. And so it really, I mean, it's pretty ironic that thought process. But again, there's just a lot of bad ideologies that seem to be winning out in a lot of places, and I think it's up to us to like, yeah, no, sorry, that doesn't fly.
Yeah, exactly. It's up to us to take the hard line on it and say no. I mean, that's one of the things I talk about in the book. We're on our own tangents of whatever, and that's fine. One of the things I talk about in the book is that was always the job. Linguistically, that's where the name of king comes from. Is to straighten things, and even and I don't even know if this is linguistically connected, but the idea of a ruler is something that you draw straight lines with.
Sure.
A ruler is a rule. Like that's there's all these linguistic connections between what a king does, what a ruler does, and drawing lines and making rules and saying this and not that, and that's what we need in our world is people who are willing to say no. no.
This is absurd.
Yeah,
sorry.
These two things. The tree is not a bush. End of discussion.
Right.
Moving on, please. Let's go about our day. And you know what? You can think whatever you want to think. You know what I mean? But the rest of us over here have collectively agreed that, for the sake of conversation and, progress and advancement, that we're just going to call it this and go, man, it's really frustrating.
That's what language is. Language is making rules.
Yes.
Language is, this is not that. That like all definitions are exclusive. If I'm looking at a camera, that is a camera and not a chair.
Right.
It only has meaning because it's a camera and not a chair. If it is
we both understand what a camera is and what a chair is. We have both agreed on the definition of these things, and that's what we're kind of running into. Is like, man, this I don't know what it. Freaking the toilet bowl of mismatched definitions of things that's just swirling together. It's like you can't make heads or tails out of stuff. And again, there are going to be some extenuating circumstances of ambiguity that may require a little bit deeper probing to get to a decent definition. But that shouldn't, again, because there is an exception, it shouldn't overwrite any definition whatsoever. And so man, I think we need more fires in the dark. I think we need to, this idea of creation, right? Like, we as men have this power to create things. So let's get to creating. Let's not sit around and wait for someone else to do it. It's like, man, I appreciate that there are guys like Jack Donovan creating books and all these other things. But shit, now I need to be creating my own stuff, and hopefully that inspires someone else to do the same, and so on and so forth. And, eventually we'll burn so bright that the other stuff just, the darkness gets eliminated, essentially. The darkness of the ambiguity and all these other things that just really don't seem to be very useful, kind of just fade away.
I mean, hopefully. I mean, it's there's.
I have a very optimistic view. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tendency to like, well, we have to play into the worst because that's what everybody else is doing.
Right.
Like I said, let's just be Washington instead. Just be better, and just be better, and hopefully, like you said, it'll inspire enough people that there's a wave in that direction. Because the thing is, you lose yourself if you stoop to that lower level and like, well, I'm just going to tear everything apart too.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to and I'm just going to play that game on the worst possible level in a way that I don't really believe that is best. You do have to be ruthless a little bit, and that's okay. I mean, even Washington had there's that whole show, Turn or whatever, about Washington spy.
He crossed the Delaware on Christmas Eve, like at midnight. It's like it's pretty, but sometimes that's what it calls for.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be ruthless and committed to your ideal, but you have to have an ideal. You have to have something you stick behind. And if you just compromise that to the point where, you're just bitching for a reason, and because you're bitching, and that's
Right.
That's really what I think. When I see people in like Washington or whatever, I feel like they've gotten to a point where they're playing a game, and they actually don't believe in anything. Like where they're just like, well, I'm on Team X and you're on Team Y, and we're just going to screw you, and we're going to see how long we can screw you until you screw us, and then we're just playing this little game. And I think that that's the way a lot of journalism is, and I mean, or website hit writing, like clickbait writing.
Sure.
I think that's what that is. It's just people playing a game and not really having any integrity and not really sticking to any kind of evaluation of what they think is right and wrong.
Yeah, and it becomes completely unproductive, and the sooner we can get away from that as a society, I think the better off we're going to be. And so for those who maybe are looking for some inspiration and want to kind of read for themselves these concepts that you and I have been discussing, the book is Fire in the Dark, and I'm assuming they can get it pretty much anywhere where books live.
Yeah. It's on Amazon and as a paperback now, and Kindle and iBooks and all that. And as soon as I finish recording the Audible, then that'll be out. But
nice.
That'll take me until probably April because it's a lot of work and it's hard.
Awesome. And then people can check you out. What's the website?
JackDonovan.com, and obviously my Instagram is @StartTheWorld.
Awesome, man. I would love to continue with this, and we'll obviously have more conversations in the future. But I think, man, this has been a lot of great stuff that we've covered, and hopefully the folks out there listening will appreciate it and get some stuff out of it. Jack, always a pleasure. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, awesome, man. Great to jump in.
Awesome. Take care.